I'm a Scorpio. I like long walks, puppies, kitties.
Oh man, the girl viewers just went up by 10-fold now.
Taken. Okay. So I guess this would be for anybody that's kind of maybe looking to buy a new snowboard. If you're new to buying snowboards, I'd say that there's some basic things that you want to learn. The first question that I generally ask people when they come in to buy a snowboard is, what size foot do they have? That's kind of one of the more important things, because I tell everybody this. Back when I was a kid and we'd go into the bike shop and we'd buy a snowboard, it was nose to chin graphic, you'd buy it. And nowadays you could kind of go that route. You could come in and you could go, okay, I like this board, nose to chin, I'll take it. And that might fit, but nowadays the boot size is pretty important when it comes to buying equipment, because here's an example. So like, let's say this here is a Defender of Awesome, okay? Super amazing board, but this is the Defender of Awesome in a wide version. So I have a size 8 boot, so if I bought a wide board, what's gonna happen is it'll fit on here and the board would float really nice, but because I'm running a size 8 boot on a wider board, it's gonna be slower on the edges. So I would never just buy a board off the way it looks. I would definitely find something that is gonna fit your boot and your riding style, where you ride, how long you've been riding. So that's pretty important when looking at equipment. You don't just wanna go, okay, I like the graphic on this, and buy it off that, because you might get a Ferrari when you need a Subaru, okay? So that's generally where we start when we look at snowboards. You come in, we look at foot size, ask you how long you've been skiing or snowboarding, where you ride, and then what you generally like to ride. So I guess we could say, you know, if you're a guy that's from here, you might buy a board that's a little bit softer, you know, something softer flexing, because it's a little bit more fun. We don't go as fast around here. If you're a guy that goes out to the mountains, you might want something that's a little bit stiffer, more aggressive when you go fast. So stiffer equipment is generally made for a guy that rides faster. Softer boards are easier, they're more fun to ride, they're a little bit more designed around the guy that wants, or girl that wants to go and ride in the snowboard park. And there's kind of a little bit of, I don't even know the right word, but there's a little bit of in between there, like this board, navigator, right here. Okay, so like this board, this is an all-mountain board, and the tail is stiff, but the nose is soft. Okay, so you'd think, okay, well, why would you want that? So a board that has a softer nose generally is going to kind of plow through stuff. Stiffer tail makes it so that if you jump off something big, it kind of pulls the board up, you can ride away from it. So you don't always necessarily need just a stiff board for riding big mountains. Sometimes a softer nose is nice. Also, when buying a snowboard, there's a few differences in the way that they're built. Back in the day, there was just a technology called camber, and I'm going to find a camber board and I will show you. Okay, so this is a cambered snowboard. What that means is if we take this, you might want to come and get closer to the ground. So like when I take a camber snowboard and I lay it on the ground, the tip and the tail are touching. It's kind of like a bridge or an arc, okay? And so when I stand on this snowboard, I now push all of the edge on the ground. So there's a lot of effective edge. So for the guy that goes fast, he wants to do those deep carves, you got a lot of edge on the ground, okay? So this has been around the longest, the tried and the true. A few years ago, they came up with something like this, a reverse camber, or a rocker, or a V-rocker, you know, all these different companies got their own special names. But essentially, really what it means is the middle of the snowboard is now touching, and the tips are up. So the board is actually bent slightly this direction. So on a board that's rockered or reverse cambered in deeper snow, it tends to float a little bit easier. Also, if the board is bent this direction, it tends to turn easier. So anything I would say that has a rocker build to it, and there's a bunch of different ways that they build rockers with cambers. I don't want to get too technical, but they just turn easier. They float easier. Okay. Let's see. What else could I tell you? So there's rockers, there's cambers, there's everything in between.
How would you range them from skill set?
As in like
Beginner to intermediate to advanced?
on a board. So like if a guy came in, he was somebody that was new, you're saying, as opposed to a guy that's been riding 15, 5, 10 years, and comfortable? Okay, so that's a good question. Right on. So when we look at a board like this, so this is Burton's most easy riding snowboard. It's almost completely flat along the edge, and then it has a rocker on it. Okay, it's a super soft snowboard. Also, this board has a little bit of almost like a boat or a bevel to the edges. It's not totally flat. And the reason they do that is, you ever notice when are you goofy or regular? Left or right?
I do regular.
So you ride left foot forward. Okay. So you ever have this happen to you? You got your left foot, you're cruising down the hill, and the board kind of starts to pull one way and you catch an edge, right?
Yeah.
Happens to all of us.
Oh, yeah.
Or the opposite, it kind of goes this way and you catch an edge. So on a board like this, because it's kind of an entry-level board, having those rockers up and the bevel to the edge, it doesn't catch an edge as easily. So for a guy that's just coming in, would I sell him Travis Rice's board? I guess if he wants it, yes. It's kind of like buying that Ferrari when he just got his license. He should be driving a Subaru.
Right.
So yeah, I wouldn't just buy it off the way a board looks. Definitely buy something off of how long you've been riding, how wide it is for your foot, where you plan on riding. So like this is your Burton entry level board. Pretty cool, super fun, probably their easiest riding snowboard that they make. So then we look at something like this. Now this thing's pretty crazy. Burton generally doesn't make a lot of soft boards. This is one of their softer, real easy riding freestyle boards. And this is camber, but it's a different type of camber. So normally your camber on a board kind of starts in the nose, arcs up like a bridge to the tail. On this board, it's actually in front of the bolts or the insert, and it's just a camber in the middle, and then it's flat. So this is going to have that power that your camber snowboard would, but by making it flat, it's real forgiving and easy to ride, and rides away from tricks if you kind of mess up a little bit coming off something. This is going to kind of cheat. So this is a really cool freestyle board. And then when it comes to buying boards, some guys they'll have what they call a quiver of snowboards. Like this. This is one of the first examples. This is kind of like an easy riding, park specific. Will it work in deep snow? Sure. It sure would, but generally what you do is you'd move your bindings back on a board, less tail, more nose, and it's going to float for powder. But if you get into something that's made for powder, like this board right here, and so you can see it's definitely shaped different. You can see how the inserts on this board are set back, we would call it. Where like something like this, if we mount the bindings, it's what we call centered. So the nose and the tail are the same distance. You can ride it either way real easily, flip it around, ride it backwards or forwards. Where on this board, our inserts, you can kind of see they're set back towards what they call the tail, that's the nose. And so by having less surface in the back, more in the front, this board just wants to float. It wants to rise up into deep snow. this is definitely cheating when it comes to deep snow. So this would be, I would consider what they call a quiver board. This is for the person that, you know, they buy a new board every year and they've got their park board, they've got their big jump, go fast snowboard, or their everything freestyle, then they usually buy something that's deep snow. So, and then, you know, that's, and it kind of trickles into boots and bindings kind of the same way also. So when buying a binding or a boot, this out of the way here, you know, because as humans, we kind of gravitate to the way stuff looks. I mean, I get it, I totally understand that, you know, visually, if I like the way it looks, I'm going to go and I'm going to buy it. You know, cars, vehicles, whatever it is, I gravitate to it like a shiny fish lure. So I wouldn't just buy stuff on the way it looks. I definitely would, you know, come in, talk to a guy guy or a girl that skates or snowboards or skis, and just ask them some questions, you know, and hopefully they'll direct you in the way that, you know, like that we just talked about. Hopefully they'll ask you your foot size, they'll ask you where you ride, how long you've been riding, and then, you know, we can put you on the right equipment. Same thing with bindings. So when we start to look at bindings, this is kind of their entry level. Most expensive doesn't make stuff the best, okay? That's kind of just my suggestion. If you're a newer guy, why buy the $400 binding? Unless you can still use this. If you're a newer guy, generally you're going to want something that's a little bit softer, easier for you to turn. Then when you go up in price, you're going to go up in features, a little bit stiffer material, so like a little more power, I would say that's maybe the word when you're turning. Also the base plates when you go up in price are a little bit stronger. And then you get into like this binding here by Burton, it's called the Cartel. That's kind of like their meat and potatoes, that's probably the best seller, the Mission, and this one, super nice bindings. This is where you're going to have kind of like, you know, a good stiffness, but it still has some flex. All their bindings have what they call a tool-free adjustment. So if you get out to the hill and you know you didn't adjust this stuff, because if you buy equipment from us, we will adjust it for you. So like check this out. You put your boot in there, and everybody's guilty of the one more. And when you do that, you generally are like crushing your foot and you're cutting off blood. So over here we got a little tool-free adjustment. We can actually go like this and move the strap back, pull it away so that it's not all the way down there. You want to usually end your straps right in a good area like that, sitting over the boot, comfortable. Now let's say you were barely getting in, and I got 2 clicks, and I got that size 14 boot. You know, it's like barely getting in there. That's where you'd actually give it some more room. So you got the adjustment here without needing a screwdriver. This is a little quick release, pretty cool feature that Burton does on, I'm pretty sure, not all the bindings. Yeah, they do it all the way down to the crease. Also, there's a look at when they do build stuff. So here, it's called our forward lean adjustment. This is probably one of the most overlooked features on a snowboard binding. I'll admit that when I was a kid, I would take the forward lean off my binding because I didn't really know what it did, and I saw in magazines that's what they did. And so I would do that. I would take off the forward leaner, and I would make it so the high back was just facing straight up. And the downside of not using this adjustment here is, imagine it like this. So if we leave this high back, which rests against your leg, which makes the board turn, if we leave it facing straight up in the air, let me grab the board here. So I believe this is a pretty big feature, and it's an adjustment that should always be made when putting bindings on. But this is a preference thing. Okay, so everybody's different. Some people don't ride a lot of forward lean.
What is the forward lean?
So the advantage of adding some forward lean is, imagine it like this. If we just leave these facing pretty much straight up, what's going to happen is you're going to ride around with your legs locked out. Okay, kind of stiff-legged. For the folks that have been out to the ski resort before, if you're riding up the chairlift, sometimes you'll look down, you'll see guys coming down the hill and they're kind of bouncing. They're kind of struggling, or they're looking like they're really stiff-legged. Generally, they're not running any forward pressure, okay? And so what happens is when you leave this straight up, it's the most overlooked feature on a snowboard run, I think. Now when I want to stop or turn on the heel, I'm almost falling over before my leg actually hits this, okay? So if I add some forward lean, which if I don't tell people that and I just add forward lean, generally they don't like it. And the reason why is it kind of bites into your calf, okay? And if it's biting into your calf, that's generally because you're still trying to stand tall. You're trying to stand up on it. And then it's definitely going to bite into the calf muscle. So if you bend and you let the binding do the work and you kind of bend with it, it's not going to bite into your calf, okay? So when we add some forward lean, not only does it automatically bend your knees, getting you lower to the ground, less distance to fall, but the minute you want to turn or stop, your leg hits this sooner. So it actually initiates a turn on the heel, and it helps on the toe edge also. And the reason being is if you leave these straight up, when you go from to turn on the toe, you're going from this stiff-legged stance into a bent knee and then into the turn. Okay? Well, if you're already in that bent knee stance, the turn's right there. So not only does it benefit on the heel, but it benefits on the toe because you're already in that kind of a little bit more aggressive stance. So this definitely one of the most overlooked features. This is just an opinion, okay? So it's not saying that you, I know guys that can do really nice turns without riding forward lean. They don't like it. It's all a preference. I know that I used to never ride it, and then I had broken a high back, probably maybe like 95, 96. And the guy at the bike shop at the time said they didn't have the exact model, so the bindings I had were kind of older. And so he found a piece, we mounted it up, and I was like, what is this? I've always wondered what that was. He said, it's a forward lean adjustment. So he added forward lean for me, and it changed my life. It was like the board went from skidding, like to like whoa, like it made the board actually perform like amazing. So if you're out there in cyberspace and you have one of these that you've never adjusted, I would definitely look at it, maybe make a little bit of adjustment. Generally what I do when I adjust them is I put a boot in here, and if there's a big old gap between the boot and the high back, I kind of make the binding touch it, adjust the thing correctly, and then I actually give it a little bit more. But that's my preference. So definitely look at the forward lean adjustment. If you're a guy that rides a lot of park, you might not ride forward lean. But if you're a guy that wants to like do really nice turns, you want the board to perform a little bit more, you're probably going to adjust this. Okay. So that's a little bit about binders. We've got a bunch of good ones. We sell Union, we sell Burton. And then kind of the same thing with the boots. So when you look at a snowboard boot, once again, most expensive does not make stuff the best. Because when we start to go up in price, we're going to go up, we're going to go up in all sorts of cool features. This is probably the best liner, but sometimes the most expensive boots are really, really stiff. And depending on the guy, for me, boot that's super stiff, I'm just not a fan, but that's my preference. So this is where they start with the Burton. It's a moto, so this is going to be a pretty basic boot, super lightweight. It's a pretty soft flexing snowboard boot, so it's easy to walk around in, and it's just comfortable. So someone that's newer, generally is probably going to start right here. They're not going to get that $600 boot. And they can, I'm not stopping you from doing that. It's just, if you're just getting into it, I'd probably suggest starting towards the lower end moto, or even a ruler. The ruler is probably one of the best boots for the money. It's not mushy soft, and it's not stiff. Yeah, this is kind of the middle of the road. super good. Also, the softer the boot, the more it is for the guy that wants to probably do some freestyle stuff in the park, where he wants to be able to like, you know, kind of like stretch the board out. Or the guy that's running that stiffer, more aggressive boot is probably going really fast. So there's definitely advantages of the stiffer boot, which is pretty cool. When you start to get into something like past the ruler, the photon, even the driver X is probably their stiffest boot, that or the ion. So when you get into these stiffer boots, this is more the guy that would live riding Big Sky, Jackson Hole, really big mountains. He generally gravitates to that. Because when you start riding really fast with a softer boot, they can tend to kind of like fold on you, okay? So a stiffer boot when you go fast is definitely more stable. It's funny though, so Burton has a guy that, he doesn't ride for Burton anymore, but he's been there since the beginning. His name was Terry Hawkinson. And he was one of the guys when I was a kid that I really looked up to. He was a big inspiration for a lot of people. And I would always ask the rep, what's Terry riding? And I would think, you know, because it was a big, for a while there, everyone was riding stiff boots, you know. And I was like, Terry's riding a stiff boot. And the guy's like, no, he's actually riding a really soft boot. And I was like, well, why? Some guys like a softer boot in powder because it's a little more surfy. So it really just depends on, I kind of always gravitate back to the most expensive does not make stuff the best. Find something that fits good. When you buy a snowboard boot also, if your feet are done growing, it's this one right here. This is pretty important. I know for parents that boots equipment does get expensive. You don't want to buy a new pair of boots for your kid every single year. So a lot of parents will buy snowboard boots bigger. And if you, as long as you don't buy it super big, that's okay. Just because this I would say is one of the main ingredients for snowboarding. You could have the coolest board, but if you don't have a boot that fits good, this is the main ingredients. The power steering for your feet, we say. But the reason why you buy you want to buy a snowboard boot kind of snug when your feet are done growing. And the reason being, if you guys were here, I'd have you stick your hand inside this snowboard boot, but we can visually kind of digitally do it. So if anybody that's out there, they know about snowboard boots, next time you go into a snowboard shop, or if you don't, I should say, take your hand and stick it inside the boot. And back where the Achilles tendon is, there's these things called heel anchors, okay? When I stick my hand in there, I can feel it. What that does is that grabs around the back of my foot so that when I go to turn, my foot stays locked into the boot, okay? And generally with parents or young kids, they buy boots a little bit bigger for growing room, and I understand that, but the downside is if it's too big, the foot slides up and down, okay? So then what people will do to compensate with that movement is they'll over-tighten a snowboard boot. The downside of doing that is when you start over-tightening your snowboard boot, you're now crushing the arch, crushing your foot, you're also cutting off circulation, and you're not even on the hill yet. You just put your boots on, you over-tightened them because they're sloppy, and now your feet are cold. I don't want to ride if my feet are cold or uncomfortable. So that's definitely, I would recommend buying the snowboard boots, your toes brush the end of the liner, not crush it. Because when we look at it, there's about ½ inch of material here that's going to pack, it's going to stretch out. So when you buy a boot snug, it might be uncomfortable right away, but it's going to stretch and then it's going to fit better. So that's definitely a key thing, boots. Make sure you get a boot that fits good when your feet are done growing. Don't buy it too big. Make sure it's comfortable. I would suggest women's specific boots for women because your feet are different. Same thing with the women's specific binding and boards. It's all designed different. Women are different. Their calf muscles are a little bit shorter, so the binding high backs are shorter. The boots are shorter in the calf. Women's specific boards, which we have over here, I'll grab a few just to pull them over here to show you. We've got some beautiful boards by Capita. And then there's some Never Summer. We do sell Burton. We sell. So a women's specific board as opposed to a dude specific board is generally softer. Put that down down so it doesn't fall down. It's generally softer flex-wise, so it's easier for a girl to ride because girls are not as heavy. Yeah, so you definitely I wouldn't just buy a snowboard if you're a girl and you're getting into this off of the internet. I like the way that looks, so then you buy it. It might be too aggressive for you. Definitely a woman should get on a woman-specific board. It's designed for her. It really does make a huge difference. I don't know, what else you thinking?
I think that's
Yeah,
great.
looks good.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, we're open every day till 6. Come
Bases.
down and check us out.
Thanks, dude.
You bet.